He has the oratory skills of Martin Luther King Jr., the revolutionary flavors of Malcolm X, and the Pan-African creeds of the trio of African giants Kwame Nkuruma, Captain Sankara, and Patrice Lumumba. Professor Patrick Loch Otieno, PLO Lumumba, is a renowned pan-Africanist and anti-corruption crusader. He is the lead solicitor at Lumumba and Lumumba Associates in Nairobi, Kenya, and the founder and chairman of PLO Lumumba Foundation. Named after one of Africa's greatest pre-independence leaders and Congolese first Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, PLO Lumumba took after his namesake's ideals and traveled across Africa, preaching the gospel of pan-Africanism and the dangers of corruption. A cause he admits holds no personal gains for him because of the truth he speaks.
I irritate people by speaking the truth. If I wanted to be appointed, I'll be sucking up to some president. I would be sucking up to somebody in officialdom that I may be appointed something. I'm not interested.
Professor Lumumba believes Africa's problem can only be solved by Africans when we realize the West is not coming to save us.
But they don't care about us. To them, Africa is a zoo of sorts. And until the day that we Africans realize that we are on our own, we are going nowhere.
He was born on July 17, 1962, in the little village of Usenge in the Lake Victoria area of Kenya. PLO Lumumba obtained his Certificate of Primary Education (CPE) at St. Patrick's Primary School, Kenya in 1973. He obtained O-level certificate in 1975 and Pumwani Secondary School before proceeding to Ambira High School, where he obtained an A-level certificate in 1979. He got his Bachelor of Laws (LLB) and Master of Laws (LLM) degrees at the University of Nairobi in 1985 and 1989 respectively. In 2004, he obtained a Doctor of Philosophy (PhD) in Law at the University of Ghent in Belgium. A former director of the Kenya School of Law and Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, PLO Lumumba has given hundreds of speeches on important topics ranging from anti-corruption fight and African unity to constitutional and judicial reforms. He is a passionate advocate for the urgent need for African leaders to ensure the continent's growth by taking the fight against corruption beyond the realms of rhetoric. He argued while delivering a keynote address before Nigerian lawmakers in the 8th Assembly that the problem of corruption in Africa is not because of lack of legislation, but their quality and implementation.
So we who are here must remember that when we are enacting laws regarding procurement, sometimes we do so in a manner that provides an opportunity for bureaucrats to steal.
Professor Lumumba's call to African lawmakers to enable the anti-corruption fight by strengthening legislation was indeed observed in reverse in his country Kenya, in a classic case of corruption fighting back. As head of the Kenyan Anti-Corruption Commission (KACC), Lumumba's dogged public pursuit of corrupt politicians upset the country's members of parliament. To undermine the effort of the KACC under Professor Lumumba, the MPs swiftly passed legislation whittling down the powers of the commission and forcing PLO to resign. The mood in the parliament at the time was captured by the statement referring to PLO by one of the MPs, who was being investigated by the KACC during a debate. He said, "If the current person who is sitting as a director of KACC is going to be given prosecution powers, I do not think there would be anybody sitting in this parliament." What followed was total derailment of the anti-corruption drive championed by Professor Lumumba in the Kenyan parliament through the instrumentation of legislation. Men and women elected to serve the people instead chose to serve themselves. Though his anti-corruption drive was derailed, his advocacy for good leadership in Africa has remained firmly on track. Professor Lumumba has received numerous recognitions and commendations for his works, including his 2012 recognition by the East African Association of Anti-Corruption Authorities for his exemplary contribution to the fight against corruption, and his investiture as Chief Tamber-Taylor of Liberia for his pan-Africanist activities, among others. Professor Lumumba has published several articles in peer-reviewed journals and written books including An Outline of Criminal Procedure in Kenya, An Outline of Judicial Review in Kenya, Kenya's Long Search for a Constitution, The Postponed Promise, and Judicial Review of Administrative Action in Kenya, among others. PLO Lumumba has lectured at various universities including the University of Nairobi, United States International University Nairobi, Widener University, etc. With several thousand speeches across Africa, Lumumba is unarguably one of the most recognized public speakers on the continent. In one of his speeches on African unity, PLO said, "African unity and solidarity are no longer dreams. They must be expressed in decisions. I believe that we have reached a stage in the economic development of Africa where moving forward is perilous, moving backwards is cowardice, and standing still is suicidal." Standing on the shoulders of African giants of yesteryears like Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkuruma, and Thomas Sankara, Professor Lumumba has continued to point the way for political leaders in Africa to march the continent into progress. In his spare time, PLO is known to practice martial arts and is working to create his own version of the art called Ubuntu. PLO insists that for a continent as diverse as Africa, true nationalism can only be achieved when we do away with the tribe. He has continued to uphold and protect the legacies and visions of that African giant and his peers, including Kwame Nkrumah and Thomas Sankara.